G'day guys, so we have another hero tree for Feral to look at, and this time it's for Druid of the Claw, and there's a lot more to this one, so getting into it. Massive attack, your auto attacks have a chance to empower your next ferocious bite to become a massive attack. This presumably does more damage, it does an AoE to enemies in front of you, same kind of energy interactions and cost, should work with all the bite talents, so things like Taste for Blood and Saber Jaws are going to get a lot more AoE value, can probably proc things like Sabertooth, Rampant Ferocity. Big question is whether it interacts with Apex and Apex can trigger it. We'll talk more about that later, but also you might be spending bites with 5 combo points again with this, depending how strong it is and how frequently it procs. But next up we have Dreadful Wound. So massive attack applies a bleed for 6 seconds. Seems like to all targets hit. Curious if things like Blood Talons and other finishing move talents will affect this, because it's technically part of a finishing move, right? But we'll see. I'm hoping this part is quite strong, just because the rest of the tree is quite direct damage focused. Presumably Taste for Blood works with this, so any subsequent bites within the window. Swarm might amplify it, we'll see. And Tiger's Fury is confirmed too, and there's some minor quality of life stuff with overriding. I'm curious to see how frequently this will proc from autos, that they bothered to include this, but it's nice anyway. And regarding proccing, this next node, which is a choice node, one of the options makes your first Tiger's Fury in combat make your next bite a guaranteed massive attack, but what if one of your autos procs massive attack while you're setting up your bleeds on pool? There's a lot of concern here with procs being wasted due to one overriding another. So maybe you do a different opener with this talent, where you massive attack as your first finisher before even casting Rip, just to sort of mitigate the risk of wasting a proc, which might be interesting. Also curious how this will work with Shadow Meld and Incarn. I hope they work, just because I think more guaranteed sources to proc massive attack is only a good thing, less reliance on RNG from autos. But yeah, otherwise in Mythic Plus, this is going to be nice when you're going out of combat a lot between packs. This node also gives you 5% agi for 6 seconds, which is the same duration as the base duration of the bleed. So there's some synergy there. Also, the other option is autos, so this will probably be better for AoE, especially Mythic Plus with those resets, but we'll see. The 5% agi is also going to be better for burst, because as we'll get to in a second, the capstone, you get a lot more massive attack procs inside of Berserk, and the agi benefits your CDs a lot more. Yeah, the other option, 20% attack speed for 6 seconds, might be the more single target option. Not sure if this attack speed will influence massive attack procs. However, I like that both of these nodes plus the bleed kind of incentivizes you to space out your massive attack procs for when you do get procs in quick succession, just for maximizing buff and the bleed uptime. At least I hope that's the intention, because that's really cool. But I think the attack speed node is more catered for synergy with Guardian and Tooth and Claw procs. Doesn't mean it won't be good for Feral, and if it is good, hopefully you have Wind Fury. So next up we have Aggravate Wounds, where most of your abilities can extend the bleed by 0.4 seconds, up to a maximum of 6 seconds. Although you're probably never going to hit that cap outside of maybe with Convoke, but with this talent up here, that increases your maximum energy by 20. There's some potential gameplay here where you pool energy before using your massive attack proc, so you can quickly spend it afterwards to extend the bleed, which is fantastic if that's a thing, and that's the intention, because you can utilize your resources and this tree still has bleed gameplay, so to speak. Also, this talent naturally works so well with this talent. For example, if you get a massive attack proc, you can pool your energy and then eventually spend your massive attack proc. Afterwards, you start building, spending your energy, which extends the bleed, but also you're benefiting from the agi bonus while you're spending your energy. And because you've saved up energy, you can build up towards another bite to get a bite in the same agi window. That bite also extends the bleed, and the icing on top is the bite benefits from Taste for Blood. And that's not even the coolest part. So what if you get 2 massive attack procs back to back in relatively quick succession? So you get your proc, you start pooling. If you don't already have energy, you spend your massive attack proc, you start spending your energy afterwards to extend the bleed and to benefit from the agi buff. And while you're building again, you get another proc. So instead of going for this bite, what you might do is start pooling again. Now you're not only pooling to maximize this window after you spend your proc, but now you're also pooling to maximize your bleed and buff uptime. So you let the previous bleed expire, you let your agi buff or your auto attack buff expire, and then you spend again. And with that, you get a new bleed, you get a new buff, and you can build again, extend your bleed, so on. So there's just a very nice natural gameplay flow with this tree. with synergy with all these nodes. The fact that they've made the buff the same duration as the bleed means if you were to track any of it, you'd only track the bleed. And even then it's not necessary because it's just kind of a natural rhythm where you know to save a bit of energy before using a proc if you can, if you don't already have energy, and to also quickly spend energy after each proc. Now, if it's not their intention to kind of space out the procs when you can, I'll be quite disappointed, but at the very least having these buffs and this thought kind of smooths out the RNG swings a little bit, because if you do get 2 procs back to back and you spend them quickly, you know, you're overriding the bleed and overriding the buff, so there's a bit of wasted value there. But I just really hope that you're not kind of rushing to spend your procs due to the fear of getting a new proc, you know, new massive attack proc, and that overriding your current one. Like if you're pooling energy to use your proc, but then you get another proc, that's going to feel so bad. So next up we have Claw Rampage, the capstone, and during Berserk your Shred, Swipe, and Thrash, that'll also include Brutal Slash, have a 25% chance to proc a massive attack. So another way to proc massive attack, this is going to add a lot of burst to Berserk. I think there's potential gameplay implications here. So firstly, when you get a massive attack proc in Berserk, you probably want to instantly react to it and try and use it and consume it with your next cast, because if you use another one of these builders, chances are you just proc it again and overwrite your previous proc. You'd rather use that proc, then start building again and proc another to use. So maybe if you're lower on combo points, so say you shred, you end up on 3 combo points, you proc massive attack, but obviously you want 5 to spend. So what you might do here is if you're low on energy, you just pull, you know, let your combo points in Berserk tick up to 5, then spend, you know, back to 0. Then you start building again, proc again, so on. Alternatively, if you're at 3 in this situation and your rake needs refreshing, rake doesn't count towards this. So you can safely rake to build combo points without fear of overriding. And, you know, even though rake's not included, you surely still want to keep rake up all the time during Berserk, because, you know, it gets amplified and, you know, it does a lot of damage. So that's kind of interesting, to be honest. Different ways to kind of think about this. If you're drowning in energy, maybe during Bloodlust, you might, in this situation 3, just continue your rotation as normal. You might just shred again. You know, if you overwrite, it doesn't matter. But, you know, again, if you need to refresh rake, then that's a really good opportunity to do so. The other question is, with massive attack being a stronger bite, do we pull to 50 energy to spend our procs inside of Berserk and then bite normally at whatever energy? I certainly hope that's the case, because I think that's quite interesting, reacting to the procs, and certainly possible, especially with Saber Jaws. However, given this node also kind of encourages you to use builders a lot to, you know, get more procs, it might just be better to send your procs at energy, because, you know, then you spend more builders, you get more procs. So it's really about quantity versus quality. I hope this ends up being the case, but we'll see. Also in AoE, I think you'll be reacting to massive attack procs and swapping your next spender to bite, even if you're running a Primal Wrath Terrapin Wounds build without Rampant Ferocity, because I don't think Apex is going to work with massive attack. I'm going to talk more about that towards the end. But also going back to my previous example, if it's AoE inside of Berserk, you have a massive attack proc, right? But you're only at 3 combo points. What you can do here is, again, rake, and there's always a target you can rake in AoE. And this is better than, say, spending another Brutal Slash charge, because, you know, you only have limited charges, and if you already have a proc, if you Brutal Slash again, you might just overwrite. So what you do, you rake to 5 combo points, and then spend your proc, and then, you know, use your next Brutal Slash charge, and, you know, trying to fish for massive attack procs. Also, question remains, what happens with Convoke? Because Convoke casts a bunch of shreds, bites, and even thrash. Can it proc and consume massive attacks? In which case, you'll probably want to be aligning your Berserk and Convoke again. This also means that this Berserk focus capstone doesn't necessarily favor Incarn. Obviously, one might end up better than the other, but I certainly hope their intention here is to keep them relatively tuned, which in theory, I think both this and Wildstalker do, but ultimately we're gonna have to wait and see. So quite a cool little capstone, should shake up Berserk a little bit. Also, you might have to make little decisions with finishes with this, especially in AoE. Say Rip only has 3 seconds left, you have a massive attack proc. Do you decide to try squeeze this in? Do you have enough energy and combo points to make that decision where rip won't fall off for too long? Or do you play it safe and refresh the rip, but by doing so, having to build again, you risk overriding this proc? I always like feral the most when it's about squeezing in kind of certain finishes. With the current bite and rip system, you'd always just rip here. But with massive attack procs, there's kind of an incentive to try and use them, try squeeze them in due to that fear of, you know, wasting one. So I really like that, at least inside of Berserk anyway. Also, maybe in this situation, you only have like one BT charge left, and because you're in Berserk, you know, you might not be able to proc it easily for a little while. In that case, do you secure the rip refresh, or maybe you have 2 BT charges? In that case, do you then decide to squeeze this in and use the next one to refresh rip? Little things like that. It won't really make much of a DPS difference, but I like that they exist, so really looking forward to trying this. Also, on that note, because you want to be biting a lot with this tree to spend your procs, and also shredding and swiping a lot to get more procs, you can see nodes like Circle being quite bad with this tree, at least on single target, because you know, having to refresh rip more can potentially clash with massive attack procs, even if that's a good thing in terms of gameplay. Also, Rake, having to refresh Rake more means less shreds, less brutal slashes, and you know, Vein Ripper is kind of the opposite. Maybe they'll actually be good with this, but yeah, we'll see. Next up, we have the right side of the tree, and Primal Wrath's direct damage is increased by 100%, which is really good. There's a lot to talk about here actually. So double damage seems like a lot, but it probably makes sense because this tree in general adds a lot of incentive to RF kind of builds in AoE, where you're spending with bite, not only because the tree kind of encourages bite talents like Taste for Blood, which already kind of nudge you in the direction of biting, but also with these RF builds, you're biting a lot more in AoE, so you're consuming your proc a lot faster, so less chance of overriding you know, a massive attack proc with a new proc, especially in Berserk. But I think the biggest reason is because of Apex. As I noted earlier, I don't think Apex will work with massive attack, and if that's true, which I don't know, but it would mean you'll be swapping various spenders where you're spending combo points plus energy on massive attack in AoE. And what that means is less Primal Wrath. If you're playing like a Primal Wrath Tear Open Wounds build where you only spam Primal Wrath, having to swap you know, to spending on massive attack occasionally means less Primal Wrath, so less value from these talents. So without this, it would just kind of encourage RF too much, and I think AoE plays the best when you have both, or you at least have the option for both. So it's good that this tree hopefully won't lock you into one or the other. Also, this Primal Wrath buff probably helps ensure that rip still remains the #1 priority in AoE, and then weaving in massive attacks and bites, because yeah, I think it'd be a bit silly if you prioritize massive attacks and let rip fall off. Also wondering what happens here with BT, because BT doesn't buff the direct hit of Primal Wrath, but it will buff massive attack, you would think. So, you know, currently it's rip snapshot above all, that's the priority, and you know, I think that's good. But what happens if we only have one BT charge left? Do you massive attack above rip snapshot? Personally, I don't know how I'd feel about that. I'm open to, you know, the tree changing things up, but personally I think this is always better, and then, you know, weaving in massive attacks after. However, there is one node in the tree that buffs Primal Wrath by 25%, and yeah, it's not Blood Talons, it's actually Swarm. So Swarm does buff the initial hit of Primal Wrath, so there might be potential here with this huge buff as well as this bleed for a Swarm kind of bleed variation of this tree with Unbridled Swarm in AoE. I think that would be really, really cool, and you know, more options is always good. Now the other aspect of this node is 5% bite damage, which I don't know if this applies to massive attack as well, but I kind of dislike this. So first of all, if this is just bite damage and not massive attack, the whole point of this tree is having a more powerful kind of distinguished bite. So if this is just closing the gap between the two, it's just kind of pointless, right? Secondly, I think this tree has real damage profile concerns, leaning heavily into massive attack and bite already, where everything else is just going to feel so weak. And you know, 5% extra bite damage isn't necessary at all. I think this should probably be a bleed node personally, because there's really nothing in this tree for rip and rake, and even Wildstalker has a bite focused or a node with bite damage in it. So I don't think the trees should be polar opposites. You know, bleeds is still relevant for bears. It's still the core part of feral, right? So the tree doesn't need to neglect it entirely outside of, you know, Dreadful Wound and stuff. So next up we have Shred and Swipe, getting crit chance and crit damage. Kind of goes with these nodes, focusing on those abilities. Also here there's some Shred and Swipe damage, a little bit of synergy I guess, but pretty minor. The crit damage might increase the value of crit slightly, but it'd be pretty minor. As I mentioned in the Wildstalker tree, that tree focusing on dots, it's going to like things like haste. This tree, it's probably going to be a bit more crit, a bit more verse, things like that, and that's a good thing. I like that the trees encourage kind of different gear sets. And also, most of the claws, it's probably going to be a pretty good Mythic Plus option again. You know, maybe competitive double claw rake with this tree, we'll see. Also, Feral Frenzy cooldown reduced by 5 seconds, pretty minor, but it does align it with 2 minutes. And as I talked about with Convoke and Berserk, you probably want to align them so any trinkets you use with them, Feral Frenzy can benefit from. Feral Frenzy is also a source of taste for blood, so a bit of synergy there. Feral Frenzy into Berserk and Convoke, into your massive attacks as well. So cool, but pretty minor. So left side, increase maximum energy. I already talked about this a bit earlier with pooling. Hopefully that looks like a pool. But the other thing with this is it gives you more wiggle room to go into bear without energy capping. And going into bear and capping on energy never feels good. So that has a lot of synergy with these upcoming nodes. Also, Frenzy Regen increases your maximum health by 10%. Also has synergy with these nodes. So let's scroll down. Wild Shape Mastery, most of Bear Form's defensive benefit carries over. Iron Fur and Frenzy Regen persist in cat form. With Ursine Vigor, you more or less have the full Bear Form benefit. So that's quite nice. I think one of the annoying things about sitting in Bear Form, like waiting for Frenzy Regen or waiting for damage, is not only energy capping, but also Tiger's Fury, because you're not pushing buttons, so you're not extending Tiger's Fury. It falls off, and that never feels good. So I'm really happy they're taking out some of the more punishing, more frustrating aspects of shifting, and making shifting feel a lot more powerful in general. Also with the previous node, Frenzy Regen increasing your max health by 10%. With this node, if you shift back into cat, that 10% is obviously larger because your health pool is 80% larger, so 10% on top of that. So really nice synergy with all of these. 6 seconds after entering bear form, you heal 10% of damage taken over 8 seconds. I don't know if this persists in cat form or not, but I think it's good that they retain some some value in staying in bear if it's a really serious situation. But if this also applies with cat form, that's cool too. Also, any tireless pursuit enjoyers, more shifting means more opportunities to use this. This was a godsend in Shadowlands with Bearweaving, and hopefully we see some class tree changes where we can pick it up more easily. And yeah, obviously other synergies here with Ursine Vigor, Well-Honed Instincts, Verdant Heart, Renewal, Heart of the Wild increases your maximum bear form health and gives you 2 charges of Frenzy Regen while active. So a lot of class tree synergies with this stuff. So next up, can Frenzy Regen in cat form for 40 energy. You still get the 10% increased health from this, but obviously it won't be as significant as if you went bear. Personally, I am a big fan of good uses of bear form, as long as you're not doing it too frequently, right? And with this node, it adds a lot of quality of life. So I kind of hope that bear shifting is still the more efficient option based on this energy cost. Like you still go bear when you can. Some exceptions being, you might use this for oh shit situations, emergencies. If you're in CDs in Bloodlust, you have spare energy to dump, and even just kind of a easier, more simple version for those who don't want to shift. Because I think they've added so much quality of life to bear. It would be a shame to just start using this in cat form instead. I guess the other concern here is it's not an issue for me, but I know it will be for some. Is it's adding another keybind to bear form? Oh, sorry, to cat form. When you already have the option to just bear form, Frenzied Regen, and now just come straight back. So is it the most efficient use of a keybind? I don't know. I know a lot of people like this node, don't get me wrong, it's cool. I'm just wondering, could have been better spent elsewhere, like a massive attack keybind. I don't know what you guys think, let me know, but I just don't know how necessary it is. But it is cool, and more options is always good for people. And yeah, this node has a bit of throughput. Shred and Swipe, not too much, bit of synergy with the crit node, but yeah, pretty minor. Also 4% magic DR in bear form. Glad there's still incentive to bear, so you make decisions based on how threatening something is, whether you sit bear, whether you do a quick bear shift, whether you stay cat and Frenzied Regen with energy, so decisions always good. Next up we have Wild Power Surge, so Shred and Swipe grants stacks of Ursine potential. When you have 8 stacks, next time you go bear, your next mangle or swipe I'll change that to Brutal Slash because you can slash in bear form, deals double damage and generates extra rage. So not really sure the intention here, whether it's for iron furring, whether it's for off tanking stuff, but that's super niche. Blizzard doesn't really put physical damage in the modern game for DPS and healers either. If you go through the entire Dragonflight Dungeon Journal, it's only for tanks. So I guess some of the old dungeons they bring back, like this season Waycrest, there was Soul Thorns, Blackrock Hold, there was a few things. So those are the only real places that physical damage is really that relevant. But anyway, this node has throughput, has better defensives. This seems kind of bad unless the intention is for you to go bear form every now and then as a DPS gain, in which case I am a huge fan. I know some of you might be skeptical about this, but unlike Bearweaving, at least this is gated by stacks. Bearweaving, you have to constantly do it just for a measly Sunfire. Didn't feel that great. There's also decisions to be made here. So how to best use your stack. So maybe you're low on energy, you're not in CDs, your Tiger's Fury has fallen off, your dots are up, things like that. Also, because you get these defensive benefits, maybe you know a mechanic's coming up that you want to DR in bear form, so you hold your stacks and use it then. So there's gameplay potential. Even the Mangle versus Swipe thing, like single target versus AoE, maybe they could make you do a bear form massive attack. They could make it cooler basically. And I know some people won't like this, but it's a choice node. You can always take this one. I know a lot of people wanted Blizzard to add incentive to shifting for quite a while. I say embrace the weirdness. I've seen some people complaining, but just take this, let others goof around with this, let Blizzard cook, because you never know. And I think these trees should try to do something differently. Also, I know some people don't like the slower GCD. So in cat form, we have a 1 second GCD. With shifting and outside of cat form, we have 1.5 seconds. So the difference does feel a little bit clunky. Maybe they can address this. Maybe they can do something cool with this. Let's see. There's currently a possum scratching my roof, so hopefully my mic doesn't pick it up. But next up, just quickly, a couple of concerns I haven't really covered yet. So yes, it is an RNG proc. Yes, it does concern me. Hopefully there's enough gameplay in reacting to it, in extending to the bleed, uptime, things like that. Hopefully you don't just slam it on CD, not even think about it. Because, you know, fights where there's, say, ads or whatever, ad spawn, you don't get a proc, you do 0 damage. Next pull, you get back-to-back procs. You're doing 15% more damage than the last pull, purely based on RNG. I don't like that. It's not really in the spirit of Feral. I don't think anyone really likes this. Also, Apex, again, we don't know whether it works or not, but the reason why I don't think it will work is because, firstly, Saberjaws, this doesn't work with Apex, and for good reason. I'm not going to get into it today, but if you get an Apex proc right before you use your massive attack, that massive attack is suddenly doing 40% less damage. Also, you know, I think these procs you should react to have to spend combo points and energy on, because, you know, they're quite powerful. Feel a little bit cheap just using them with Apex procs, especially with the AoE I was talking about earlier with the Primal Wrath node. Weaving in the occasional massive attack procs where you're reacting to it is a lot more interesting than just Primal Wrath spamming. So hopefully Apex doesn't work, or rather that's my wish. Maybe others will think differently. Might be a bit of a contentious opinion, but I think it's for the best if it doesn't. Also, this tree in general pushes you towards bite nodes, and if Apex, you know, Apex is going to be a really good node with this tree regardless, and if it works with massive attack, it's just going to be perma-locked, and I don't know if that's a good thing. So just going to conclude the video with a bit of a personal wish list. Firstly, I hope the procs aren't too frequent, just so you have time to sort of space them out, think about how you're going to use them, things like that. I think it'd be bad if you feel completely rushed to spend due to fear of wasting the proc. That being said, inside of Berserk, I do like the kind of urgency this tree promotes, so that's good. Also, I kind of wish there was more guaranteed sources. Currently there's the Tiger's Fury node, and I guess Incarn and Prow, but I think there's a missed opportunity here not to have Feral Frenzy proc it, things like that, because I know it's a little bit similar to the Wildstalker tree with the Vine implant, but if it works, you know, it's good, and they're different kind of nodes, right? Plus, maybe Blizzard are kind of concerned that it would just clash on pull with the Tiger's Fury thing, but like I talked about earlier with the opener, you know, you can change things up based on those nodes. So I think that would be cool, and you know, any other guaranteed sources is a good thing. so there's less RNG, because RNG is a big problem, I think. Also, damage profile is very bite heavy. Everything else is going to feel weak. You're going to be taking a lot of bite nodes with this. So a bit more bleed emphasis would be good. I hope that the bleed that's part of massive attack, what's it called again? Dreadful Wound, is quite strong, because there's some gameplay there and varies the damage profile a little bit. Also, I hope Bearweaving is a thing. That would be cool. And I hope for good sound effects and even visual effects, because I think that's lacking with Feral. I think bite sounds bad currently. So if a massive attack sounds really cool, it would really distinguish it, right? But yeah, I like the tree for the most part. On paper, it feels like there's a lot of ways you can optimize things just by kind of following natural flow, just some basic rules. So that's the video. Let me know what you guys think of this tree. Personally, I quite like it. There's little ways you can optimize things. The tree kind of encourages sort of natural synergies and gameplay flows. It offers good defensives, good utilization of shapeshifting, but yeah, it can obviously improve in some ways. But curious what you guys think, what you think of Bearweaving, what you think of the Frenzy Regens in cat form, whether you like the bite focus, what you think about Apex even. Be good to hear your thoughts. So yeah, more videos soon. Thanks for watching.